What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about the newest A24 film that was in theaters for a little while. I didn't get the chance to catch it while I was in theaters, but it's currently available on VOD. And I was actually really looking forward to this film because of the numerous comparisons that were being made to After Sun, which After Sun is one of my favorite films of the decade. That movie moved me emotionally in a way that was almost uncomfortable, like a person peering into your soul and kind of like understanding a lot of emotions that you feel. I don't know. It's just it's a masterpiece in my opinion, and it's very slow paced. It's very slice of life. It's an estranged father and daughter on a vacation together, so a lot of scenes are just them experiencing life. So I assumed this movie was going to be very similar, slice of life movie that ultimately would have a really intense emotional payoff. And the film I'm going to be discussing with you today is Janet Planet. Janet Planet is directed by Annie Baker. In rural western Massachusetts, 11-year-old Lacey spends the summer of 1991 at home, enthralled by her own imagination and attention to her mother Janet. As the months pass, 3 visitors enter their orbit, all captivated by Janet and her spellbinding nature. In her solitary moments, Lacey inhabits an inner world so extraordinarily detailed that it begins to seep into the outside world. So, as I said, I was really excited to watch this movie, especially with the comparisons to After Sun, and I was really disappointed by this movie. I don't think it's bad by any means. I actually think there's a lot of it that's very impressive, but it's one of those films that I feel like is almost too slow and too meditative in a way that I'm sure it's going to resonate with a small group of people that can relate to very specific elements of the film. But as far as appealing to a broader audience, unless you really find specific minute details of these characters to attach onto, it's not going to be possible for you to appreciate it. And I think it's a really fascinating film to look at in comparison to After Sun, because After Sun does a lot of the same beats, but the difference is the way they build those characters up and the traits that they show of these characters that make it easier for a big third act emotional climax, where this movie, the climax is relatively bland. I mean, I feel like it's mostly just a slice of life examination over a period of time, and it just kind of ends. And I'll talk about it a little bit more as I break the movie down. At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to young Lacey, played by Zoe Ziegler, who is at summer camp. And we see the very first scene of the movie. She gets up in the middle of the night, goes to the payphone, calls her mom, and says, "Come pick me up from camp." And we're introduced to Janet, played by Julianne Nicholson, who is Lacey's mother. And she's currently dating Wayne. And Lacey asks her mom, "Are we really going to have to spend all this time with Wayne?" And she's like, "He was coming over to hang out with me while you were on vacation, and you're coming home, so you have to deal with it." And so Lacey comes home for the summer, and throughout the summer, her mother spends time with 3 different people. And we slowly get introduced to each one of these characters during the movie. We get insight into Janet's character and who she is solely based on an outside looking in perspective from Lacey's firsthand view. We are seeing this life through the eyes of a child. There's not a ton of expositional dialogue. It's mostly inferred through this young kid's experience, and that is the entirety of the film. So as I said, I was relatively let down by this movie because I feel like, as I said, I think that this movie is going to appeal to a group of people, and it's going to appeal to people who have lived a very specific type of life and who have been involved in very specific circumstances, but it's not going to appeal to a wide audience because of how scarce the character traits are. And it's like you're either going to grab a hold onto it and be completely immersed, or you're going to be someone like me who kept searching throughout the entire runtime of the film and was charmed by moments and appreciated elements of the performance, but never necessarily grabbed a hold on to something as much as I did in a film like After Sun. I will say I do think the performances here are fantastic. The young Zoe Ziegler, who plays Lacey, does a really nice job in this movie. I think this is her first role, and she does a fantastic job here. She has some really funny dialogue. I think the way she interacts with characters is really great. I also thought Julianne Nicholson's performance as Janet was really solid. She is the crux of the film. She is her child's idol. Lacey loves her mother so much, and you can see it through the way that she looks at her and through the cinematography. It's really a story of a kid who just wants to be close to her mother, and her mother is distracted by a ton of other things. I thought the cinematography in this movie was incredible. I cannot believe this is a directorial debut. This movie looks beautiful. There are a ton of scenes in particular that are just kind of seared into my brain. I thought the cinematography was immaculate. So many amazing moments, even like moments that they used on some of the posters in this film. Just really fantastic. And I love movies that can be so attentive to little details, especially when they're such simplistic ideas for a movie. Like this is very much a slice of life movie, and to take so much time and attention to detail in the cinematography makes it easier to sit and be invested in. But that's about as far as the praises go for me. I think that my big issue with this movie, and I hate saying this about a movie, but it's very, very slow. And the issue with it being slow is that unless you grab a hold on to something that these characters have to offer, you're not going to be particularly compelled. I love slow-paced cinema. Some of my favorite films of the past several years are movies like After Sun, Patterson, Perfect Days, Under the Skin, movies that are very slow-paced, that don't necessarily have a ton of dialogue, that so much is about the way that the camera interacts with characters and what these movies are trying to say. But those four movies that I just mentioned in comparison to this film have something much larger that they're playing towards, and they have things that I feel like it's easy for each individual audience member to grab a hold onto something. The problem is here, Janet's character isn't really all that interesting. I didn't find her compelling, and I found a lot of her dialogue to be relatively annoying, especially when her female friend comes into play in the middle of the film. They have this really long dialogue sequence in the middle of the movie that I was just kind of bored by. I felt like it was a little bit too pretentious, which is crazy for someone like me to say that likes a lot of art house movies, but I didn't get a whole lot out of it. I think this movie would have been a lot more effective if we spent more time with Lacey's character, and we're technically seeing a lot of this through her perspective, but I don't feel like we get enough of her lived experience or enough dialogue with her and other people. There are a couple of moments that I think are really emotionally impactful that I enjoyed quite a bit, but like there's so many moments that just drag and drag. And the third act here, it's rough to get through. It was probably my least favorite part of the movie. Didn't really care all that much for the character. And like I said, ultimately, if you look at this film in its most simplistic idea, it's a girl who loves her mother, who feels like her mother doesn't pay her a ton of attention, and her mother is trying to get her life together, but is clearly jumping from person to person, trying to settle down, trying to be more comfortable, but just can't. But I don't think the movie is saying anything much more than that. And I've seen people kind of grab a hold on to certain elements and certain sequences in the film, and that it resonates with them more. But there's not enough here for me to ever want to go revisit it again. I don't think that there's enough here that is going to grab each and every individual viewer. And that's unfortunate, because I was hoping this would easily be one of my favorite movies of the year. And unfortunately, it was not. I think it's relatively forgettable, and I'll probably forget most of it by next week. So have you seen Janet Planet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was forgettable, which is incredibly unfortunate because it has a lot of talent involved. And I do think there are elements here that if any of this sounds interesting to you, it's worth watching, but it just wasn't for me. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.